Presented by Think Outside the Vox and Silent Rhythms.
Hello, I'm Cai. I'm an artist, an educator, and I'm partnering with Think Outside the Vox to improve museum accessibility and in art spaces.
How can museums support deafblind patrons in planning their visit?
Museums have a critical responsibility to improve access for deaf-blind patrons who want to come to their spaces. First of all, accessibility upon entering the space should be considered. Awareness of the floor plan and exhibit layout should be made accessible by installing tactile museum maps that indicate the floors and my whereabouts in the space. This allows individuals like me to plan the navigation of my visit floor by floor as independently as others that are sighted that rely upon wall-mounted museum maps. Access should also be provided in each space in a museum. If there is, for example, a print description of the space or an art piece, it is important to have that description in both braille and large print English. Often museum exhibits have vibrant colors mounted on bright white walls, which can be visually overwhelming for patrons who are deafblind. Sometimes, having a darker colored background wall for stronger color contrast can improve navigation in a space and the ability to perceive people moving in the space, and thus providing better visibility in general. On the museum website, it is important to add "Know Before You Go" information upon the site landing. This preliminary information may be accessed through perhaps a drop-down menu, and it can include information about restroom locations, exits, seating options, and rest areas, as well as low sensory spaces and where one can get food. With this information, I can better plan my trip. If I have a guide dog, it is important to know the location of the service animal relief areas so I can take care of my dog before entering the museum. If at any time I become overwhelmed at any point during my museum visit, I will have learned where the low sensory spaces are and can take that break. Know Before You Go information should also be available for download. So, I will be able to download it and access it on my phone or braille display device so that I can access the material at any point on my journey from home to the museum. It is also helpful to have a list of exhibits that I can determine what spaces I would like to visit and when. Also, make certain that you clearly state the times at which the museum closes and include the threshold of time when guests are encouraged to leave the facility. This is also important information to know in order to help individuals plan on how they will safely exit the museum and perhaps avoid crowds. Within your Know Before You Go information, please clearly outline your refund policy. Individuals who are deafblind who may have additional disabilities, such as sensory sensitivities, and who may be autistic, value knowing the refund policy. In case an individual feels too overwhelmed to attend the venue on the day they had planned, they can know whether they will get a full refund, partial refund, and know who to contact.
How can museums make exhibits more accessible to deafblind patrons?
Museums' exhibits have a wide array of diverse topics, concepts, and ideas. Often, they are very accessible to those who are sighted, but not to those who are deaf-blind. When you design an exhibit and create text panels or labels which are accessible to sighted patrons, they are not accessible to me as a deaf-blind individual. To make that text accessible, the panel should include braille as well as a large print format for low vision individuals. It is also recommended that you add QR codes to those panels. So, I will be able to scan the code with my smartphone and access the text there, or I may be able to transfer it to my braille device. That way, I can read the text at my leisure. All spaces in the museum should have these features so that anywhere a sighted patron is able to read text, I am equally able to as well. For those who may prefer an audio format, a QR code should also lead to audio description that can be downloaded and listened to by patrons on their own personal devices. Another consideration for museum accessibility would be to have 3D maps in the lobby area. 3D maps allow individuals like myself to understand the layout of your space. Once I have a good sense of the layout of the space, then it is much easier for me to navigate the additional assets such as tactile floors, or to get to special exhibits in the museum. Having differentiated textures on floor spaces allows me to know different areas of the museum. With these assets available to me, I can make a plan about which spaces I want to attend first, second, and make best use of my time at your museum. Having a map key within the map itself means that I'll be able to navigate different areas of the museum and have mirrored textures on the tactile map that correspond to raised surfaces or alternative textures in the exact actual exhibit space. In the museum's Know Before You Go information, there should be a description of where the front desk or reception area is in relation to that entrance. Once I come through the door, I should be familiar with the route and the turns that may be required to reach the visitor services area. Once patrons arrive at that front desk, they should be familiar with where the elevators are located and where the stairs are for different floors, or if any steps are there to be aware of. Another facet of museum accessibility is having tactile exhibits. Tactile exhibits allow me to feel different textures and pieces that illustrate the themes, concepts, and ideas of the exhibit. For example, this piece that I am touching now is a section of pineapple. The corresponding example of this piece that I'm touching is raised in letters to allow me to identify what I am touching and what the context is. The informational text should also be available in braille or large print so patrons have different formats to learn what the exhibit is about. You can also add a QR code for patrons to scan on their personal devices to read in their preferred format or transfer to a braille display. Offering multiple formats allows patrons to pick which method is most accessible for them.
What should museum staff know about interacting with deafblind patrons?
If my friend here to my right is deafblind, how would I get their attention? Tapping the person on the shoulder and making sure to leave your hand there on their shoulder is important. This provides the deafblind person with information about where they can look to perceive your face. If you were to tap without leaving your hand on the shoulder, they may not know where to look or might in fact think that you have left completely. If you're approaching a deafblind person from the front, never wave your hand in front of their face, which can be very startling. Deafblindness can apply to a wide spectrum of vision. Some individuals have very narrow fields of vision, so waving your hand abruptly in front of their face can be very startling. Instead, maintain a respectful distance to them. Wave to get their attention and wait for their acknowledgement. It is okay to be a close distance as long as you are not waving your hand close to their face. Another option to get their attention is by facing them and tapping them or laying your hand on their shoulder. Some museums have exhibits that are very valuable and have visible boundaries to avoid crossing and getting too close to a piece. However, I have to be close to something to gain visual information. Being a farther distance from a piece is inaccessible to me. One recommendation in this regard is to have some pieces or exhibits that do allow patrons to get closer or even touch the piece to better understand what is being displayed. For example, being close to this sculpture piece behind me and being able to feel it with my hands provides me with more information.
A special thank you to the following organizations: the Sudbury Foundation, Open Door Theater, the Discovery Museum, and the Mass Cultural Council.